As she said, I'm Suzanne Scheiber. I am the founder of Dream Green Volusia. We are a not-for-profit environmental organization in Volusia County, and we do work countywide. We do a lot of things, but the main item that I like to focus on personally is land conservation. And as she said, it's been quite active lately in land conservation in our county for the last 2 years because Volusia Forever was renewed. So the presentation I'm going to do here today is actually what we've been working on. Even though I serve on the committee, I want to make it clear I'm not representing the Volusia Forever committee, I'm representing my organization itself. So you can go to the next slide. So in the state of Florida, we have what's called the Florida Wildlife Corridor. In 2021, the state legislators decided to pool their efforts and take a vote. They did what was passed as the Wildlife Corridor Act, and they funded $400 million for land conservation in the state. About $300 million came from ARPA funds or COVID funds, and about $100 million was funded to Florida Forever, but collectively it was $400 million. Now that's a lot of money, but the state of Florida is also very large. So we have approximately 17.7 million acres right now of Florida. 54% of that is existing conservation lands. That is not all funded through the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act. There's also St. John's water management land, there's privately owned conservation land, there's county-owned, city-owned, there's a wide variety. But about 54% is conserved. So about 46% is considered opportunity lands. And that's the areas outside of the corridor, but are the closest that would keep connectivity. So we have what's referred to as priority lands 1 through 5 in the state. 1, 2, and 3 lands actually are capable of receiving funding if they meet the qualifications. 4 and 5, they're desirable, but they don't receive the funding, and they are further away from the corridor itself. So 1 is high priority. That would be, right in the heart, most environmentally sensitive, endangered species, items like that. You can go to the next slide. So why would the state legislators fund $400 million to the Wildlife Corridor in 2021? Connectivity for wildlife is really important, but I'm going to be brutally honest. A lot of people don't care about wildlife. So then you have other reasons though. And I'm going to touch on wildlife in just a minute. But connectivity for wildlife is the concept. But beyond that, you also have to protect the aquifer. And we have a lot of the aquifer in the corridor. It is not all in the corridor. So keep in mind that I just told you that about 54% is protected, but not all of our aquifers in the corridor. Then beyond that, you also have food, and we have a real disconnect with food these days. People walk into the grocery store and they kind of think that their food, they don't think of where it comes from, it's in the grocery store, so it comes from the grocery store. But that's not true. I mean, we all know that food is not grown in the grocery store. So it's grown in the wildlife corridor. We have ranches and farming, cattle. We have a lot going on food-wise in the corridor, and if we don't protect that, we will lose some of our food sources. And then last is understanding tourism and the economy. So there are, about a year ago, I was in the Wildlife Corridor Foundation meeting, and they had said there were about 128,000 jobs in the corridor throughout the state of Florida. So if you take into account what I just said with food itself, you can think ranching and farming, those are jobs, people that work on those farms and own those farms and own those ranches. Then we also have ecotourism going on, and we have fishing, and there is hunting, kayaking. There's people who rent kayaks, there's people who make a living with the ecotourism that's going on within the corridor itself. So collectively, that's a good part of our economy when you think about it. So there's a lot of reasons there that you would want to protect the corridor, and when they discussed this concerning the $400 million to fund it, those were some of the items that were the most important that came up. Recently, this is not talked about really, and I'm in the process of learning why myself, because I honestly don't know. But I never hear anyone speak about history in the corridor. And in my mind, while I don't hear others saying it, I'm starting to say it. Why aren't we protecting history in the corridor? Because we have a really rich history in our state, and in this wildlife corridor, there is a lot of history in the corridor. If you've been to Blue Springs in our county, they have an entire museum in there. It's great. If you haven't attended, go take a look. Next slide. So, in our county, Volusia Forever was renewed. It's a land conservation program. It was in place for 20 years. And in 2019, residents voted, and 75% of the people that voted in favor of land conservation. They voted to tax themselves to achieve land conservation. Think about that, 75% is really high. So a lot of people want to protect land, and the land in our county is protected. It is through passive recreation that is allowed on it. So what's passive? That would be hiking, kayaking, fishing, bicycle riding, frisbee golf. They may call it something different than frisbee golf, but that's what I call it. You throw frisbees and you hit a little pole or a tree. Those are some of the, even riding horses, that's considered passive. So we have quite a big history. We're going on 22 and a half years now of land conservation in our county. And people want this, and they showed it by voting for it. So if you take into account how many people voted for Volusia Forever, they put their faith in our government to do the right thing with their money and purchase conservation land. And then we're going to talk about what that means. What is conservation land? What are some of the ideas around conservation land? Next slide. So in our county in 2001, we had, this goes all the way back to the first Volusia Forever. When it started, we had our own Volusia Wildlife Corridor created. And this is a map of where that is within our county. And it's just by sheer coincidence, our numbers follow pretty closely with the state numbers. We are at about 55% and 45% not. So if you look, Volusia County is really big, and while 55% of that green area is what's protected, because don't misunderstand, we do have a lot of development in the corridor as well. It's not all protected, 55% is what's protected. But that is the current corridor boundary within our county. And for how big our county is, 45% unprotected in that area is actually a lot of land. Next slide. So in our state, we have 134 endangered, threatened, and species of concern. Generally, you don't hear, when I say this out loud, I can honestly say I don't recall sitting in any meeting anywhere and hearing that we have 134 endangered, threatened species of concern. You know, I just said not everyone cares about wildlife. We do have an FWC program, and those figures are on their website. And FWC is Florida Wildlife, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation, and they take care of what's in our state. And I only listed a handful of those, just a few, of the ones that are might be most familiar to you within our county. Now, the Florida panther, I admit, I've only heard about Florida panthers in our county. I can't say I've ever seen one, but I have seen a lot of those other species that are listed there. But within the Volusia Forever program, there is a question that asks about endangered species on the land. And I can tell you, most often the answer is, if it's environmentally sensitive land, is gopher tortoise. There are a lot of gopher tortoises. And sometimes it's black bear territory as well. Next slide. So the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation works with Carlton Ward. He's a photographer, and right now there has been this year in particular a lot of talk about Florida panthers, and they have mostly been seen in the southern part of the state, although I did hear that one was spotted in Osteen. Apparently they have a golf course there, and there was a camera on and it happened to spot one. I have yet to see that, but that was in our county. But in the southern part of the state, the panthers are being seen. Carlton spent 2 years making the movie Path of the Panther, and he put cameras out. And if you've not seen it yet, I'm really encouraging you to go see it. And I did put pathofthepanther.com on there for you to be able to look it up because it came out in February. But the movie is about him trying to film Florida panthers to be able to use his photographs and his videos to go and stop the road to nowhere, the highway to nowhere on the other side of the state, in the southern part of the state. They were looking at building a major highway right through panther territory. And they're already being reduced in numbers. They were in the entire southeast portion of our country, and they have now been reduced down to the southern part of Florida. And this is covered in the movie. And so what he does is he takes his cameras out in the woods and sets them up, and they're on automatic, motion censored. And so when the panthers, the bears, and you get to see during the whole movie everything that's going on in the woods, and that's kind of fun. Everything from raccoons and all of it that's passing by his cameras. But it's also incredibly frustrating because bears come up and knock the cameras over, and he spent 2 years trying to capture panthers on film, so that he could work with the foundation to get more money, to get more conservation land. He put forth a huge effort. The movie came out in February, like I said. It played everywhere, and last month, in the month of July, it was the #1 documentary in the United States for people watching.
Wow.
So I'm really hopeful that it wins an award, and like I said, if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to go see it. It's really well done. He spent a lot of time and effort. There's a lot to be learned in the film, and I don't want to ruin the ending, but let's just say this year the funding was pretty good at the state level. So he does a really excellent job. And of all the people I met, I really want to pay kudos to Carlton because I've met him twice, and when he speaks, he is so passionate that it just like flows out. So he's a very good representative for the Florida Wildlife Foundation and for the Path of the Panther movie and for himself and what he's doing. Next slide. So I just said at the state level this year, the funding that was passed was pretty well done. This is $976 million total, and then there's kind of a breakdown of that. The one section that refers to O to O, Osceola to Ocala, we are in that section. And of the remaining land in our county, this was recently said that we have about 3,500 acres remaining that would be in that Osceola to Ocala money. So Volusia Forever is a willing sellers program, and that means that if the seller is not willing, no one comes in and takes their land. They are paid for their land, so if they express an interest in selling their land, then the county negotiates with them to purchase the land for conservation. But that's how it works. If no agreement is reached, then nothing happens. The land's not purchased, it's their land, they can either keep it or sell it on their own, and it doesn't usually get sold for conservation land, then it usually gets developed. And if you think of that in terms of the corridor, if the object is connectivity and someone doesn't want to sell their land for land conservation, that's how we end up with various development within the corridor itself. Next slide. So over the course of the last few months, around April, I took a trip to Tallahassee and met with land conservation, various land conservation people. And it occurred to me that since we have had conservation in our county for 22 and a half years, wasn't it time to look outside of the corridor? Now, you can get funding outside of the corridor for other conservation land, but matching funds is always the problem. Volusia Forever is a matching funds program. So if the county goes to purchase land, there has to be a match from somewhere to pay for it. It's not always 50-50 on the match. Different negotiations happen, but there still has to be matching funds from somewhere. So if we have 55% of our corridor in conservation and the remaining 45% is not, but we also have a lot of development, we just renewed our program 2.5 years ago. So what now? What do we do with the rest of our money? Where do we find matching funds for the rest? What happens to the rest of the corridor? There were a lot of questions. So over the course of the last few months, in research, it turns out that you can possibly expand the corridor in our county. It's going to require what's referred to as ground truthing. Ground truthing is through GIS. It means you go out and you look at the land, you see if there's endangered species, you look to see if there's wetlands. It requires research. So on June 16th of this year, only a couple months ago, the Volusia Forever Committee voted in favor of the staff doing the research to see if we have any other land qualifying to be included within the corridor. And the reason would be matching funds. That would be the main reason for doing this. So you would want to try to expand the corridor if there's anything that qualifies outside of the corridor. And in order to do that, the original corridor that you saw on the map in our county that was all green, the Florida Ecological Greenway Network did the ground truthing and did the research for that. Well, that has to be done again. We would research the land, we would submit it to the Florida Ecological Greenway Network, and they would make a decision on whether it qualifies or not. And the Volusia Forever Committee voted in favor of this. So in Volusia County, you don't want to take anything for granted. Beyond that, our organization went to some cities to request letters of support. And right now we are, as of today, we've got 5 commitments for letters of support for doing the research to see if we can expand our Volusia Wildlife Corridor. Our Volusia Wildlife Corridor is a subset of that entire state corridor that you saw early on. But in order to expand as the entire state, the state legislators have to do that. So the least bureaucratic way and the most effective way is to take our county, do it ourselves, and submit it to Florida Ecological Greenway to see if we qualify. So that's what we've been working on. Now, on August the 1st, what I'm explaining here is going to be coming before our Volusia County Council. And they're going to be voting. So why wouldn't we do this? It's kind of a no-brainer that 75% of the people voted, and we want matching funds, so why would we need to go for it? There's really no reason not to do it. The only reason we don't have more than 5 letters of support from cities is that meetings overlap, and I can only be so many places at one time. This is not something I could send someone else to do. I have to speak because I'm the one that put forth the effort with the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation. So I'm hoping 5 letters is enough. We need public support. We need people to show up. And for everyone that voted to tax themselves, you should be in favor of this. Because if you voted for conservation land, there isn't a reason why not to do it. And now off of this slide, I covered priorities 1 and 2, and 3 are eligible for funds. In our county, we only have priority 1 and 2. We don't even have any priority 3 lands. I'm hopeful that something qualifies for priority 3. And as far as I covered, the committee voted 8-0, and the council is going to be voting on August 1st. We've had land conservation 22 years, all the more reason to do it now. We've had a lot of development happen in our county, and so the water has been shifted for runoff and flooding. And lastly, it's a willing sellers program. So the ask when I go to the cities is, why do this? It's for funding opportunities if the land qualifies, and do you support staff doing the research and submitting to the FEGN, which is short for Florida Ecological Greenway Network, which is a mouthful to say. And so far, it's been yes. And that concludes really my presentation. If you have any questions.
How important is public support at the council meetings?
Public support at the council meetings is crucial when it comes to items like this and other items as well. For whatever reason, I don't want to be a downer on my own presentation, but it is difficult to get people to show up for environmental issues. I see them show up for other items that I'm not knocking at all. Everything from cultural arts, which I support, but where are our priorities when it comes to our water? Our aquifer and our drinking water are in the wildlife corridor. And as far as connectivity goes and all the other items, we do have farms in our county that are in the wildlife corridor as well. And public support shows the council that you want what you're showing up for. And in this case, what you actually voted for already. So that's the answer to that. One thing that I always learn things when I'm researching, and one thing that I learned, and you may know, but I did not know, when you have a species that was on the FWC slide, it says special concern or species of concern, species of special concern. That means that they are not protected in any way, but they're starting to show signs of becoming threatened. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because of disease, it could be because of their habitat being taken away. There's a lot of reasons. So species of concern, we really never hear about that. It's always either endangered or threatened. And if you have a species of concern and they're not protected, this is how we end up with a shift from species of concern to threatened and then to endangered. And by the way, endangered, you hardly ever see something that's listed as endangered. We've had, in our state, we've had wildlife that's gone from endangered because we've done a better job at times and gotten it back to threatened, which wasn't perfect, but it did come back. And then at times we've gone from threatened to endangered, but you really don't hear very much about species of concern, and that there were a variety of reasons and things like, like I said, disease and habitat loss were two. So just throwing that out there. I even learned something myself about species of concern. Anybody else? All right. Thanks for having me and allowing me to speak today.
Thank you for coming and speaking for us. We really appreciate it.
Ava, is that still running? I had more questions, but I didn't want my voice on the video.
Too late.
Well, the one question was fine. Can you tell us how is Path of the Panther? Is there, I know you can find that online, I just checked, you can watch it on Hulu.
You can watch it on Hulu, and I believe you can watch it on Disney. Those two picked it up. I don't believe it's playing at the movie theater anymore. It was playing for 2 or 3 weeks, even a month, as when it first came out. We did have it play in our county. It was at Epic and at Deltona at the time, and the next closest one was Orlando or Palm Coast when it came out. Yeah. So it's about a normal length movie. It's not extra long or short. It's about an average movie. Yeah, for a documentary.
I'm gonna invite Carlton to the August 1st meeting. I don't know how I can fit him in. I don't expect him to come for 3 minutes, but that would be really nice to have him there.
Mm-hmm. Maybe as a group, you all would watch the movie. You might. I think you would like it. It's not boring. There's a lot to learn, and it's well done, which is why last month it was #1 in documentaries.
Wow,
So
that's great.
yeah.
We will definitely